240, and that's me being generous with you, Mr. Deal. It's worth 6. It's worth 6 if a man in Birmingham with a magazine subscription wants it on a Saturday. Today, it's worth 240 because that's what I've got in the drawer and because I'll be sitting on it till Christmas. He didn't take his hand off it. That was the first thing. Most people slide the item across the glass and step back and let you handle it. Because that's the ritual. That's how the whole thing works. You put the object down, you let the other man pick it up, and then you both pretend the number is a fact about the world instead of a fight you're having. Deal kept 2 fingers on the case. It was a Martin, or it wanted to be. A dreadnought with a spruce top gone amber at the edges, and a crack running up under the bridge that somebody had filled with the wrong color glue about 20 years ago. Nice guitar, not 600 nice. I'd had the case open maybe 90 seconds, and I could smell the inside of it from where I stood. That old flannel and rosin smell that gets into the lining and never comes out. Mr. Deal. He was looking at the wall behind me. I have a wall of guitars back there, 30-some of them on hooks, and people look at that wall all the time when they don't want to look at me. So I didn't think much of it. You want to sell or you want to pawn? Because those are 2 different conversations, and I'll give you a different number for each one. I don't know. Well, I set the loop down on the counter mat. It's a green rubber mat, the kind you see under a cash register at a parts store, and it's got a coffee ring on it older than my truck. Pawn's 90 days. You bring me the note and the interest. You get your guitar. Sale's a sale. Sale's more money today, and no guitar ever. It was my father's. They all say that. I'm not being cruel. Half the things that come across my counter belong to somebody's father, and the other half belong to somebody who's about to be somebody's father and needs $300 before Friday. You learn not to weigh it. If you weigh it, you go broke in 14 months, and then there's no shop on the strip at all, and everybody drives to the place out by the interstate where they'll give you $110 for the same guitar and not look up. Then pawn it, I told him. 90 days. You come back. He still hadn't moved his hand. That's when I actually looked at him instead of at the guitar, which is backwards, and which is the kind of mistake I've been making for 22 years in that building. He had on a canvas work shirt, sleeves down, buttoned at the wrist in July in South Alabama, and there was a stain on the left cuff about the size of a playing card. Dark. Not oil dark. Oil goes rainbow at the edge when it dries on canvas, and this didn't. His face was wet the way everybody's face is wet in July, but he wasn't breathing like a man who'd walked across a hot parking lot. He was breathing slow. Slower than me. The bell over the door went. Vernell came in with the box of tags from the printer, holding it against her hip the way she carries everything. And she said something about the truck being parked crooked, and I half heard it. "You all right?" I asked him. "It's hot." "It is that." I pushed the ticket pad toward him and got the pen out of the cup, the one with the bank's name rubbed half off. "I need your license." He looked at the pad. He looked at it a long time. Long enough that Vernell set the box down on the end of the counter and looked at me over his shoulder with her eyebrows up. And I made the small motion with my hand that means, "Give me a minute." $240, Deal said. $240. On a pawn. On a pawn, I'd do 200 even. Interest is on the state schedule. It's posted right there on the wall by the door. I don't set it and I can't move it. Okay. He took his hand off the case then, and I got the case turned around and the neck out of the way. And I remember thinking, good, that's done, because the man behind him had been waiting 6 or 7 minutes with a box of DeWalt batteries under his arm. And I hate making people wait. That's the whole business, honestly. Not the gold, not the guns, not the seasonal rush on chainsaws. Just moving people through the counter without making any of them feel like a beggar. Deal put his license down, and I picked it up, and my thumb went across it, and it was wet. Not sweat wet, slick wet, a little tacky, the way a countertop feels when somebody spilled a Coke and wiped it with a dry rag. I turned it over. There was a smear on the back of it, brown-red, dried at the edges and not dried in the middle. "Sir, are you hurt?" I cut it on the tailgate. "Let me see it." "It's nothing." He was already stepping back from the counter, and he did this thing where he pulled his left arm in tight against his ribs, tucked it, the way you'd hold a wallet in a crowd. The bell went again, and 2 women came in for the jewelry case, and one of them was already saying something about a chain her sister wanted. And the man with the DeWalt batteries set them on the glass and started tapping the plastic with his fingernail. "Hang on," I told the room. "Just hang on 1 second." Vernell came around behind me and got the ticket book because she thought I was going to hand off. She's worked for me 11 years, and she reads the counter better than I do most days. She's got a way of standing just slightly in front of a person she doesn't like the look of, angling her shoulder, and she did that. Put herself half a step toward Deal with the ticket book up like a clipboard. "You want to fill in your address, hun? Or you want to just tell me and I'll write it?" Deal didn't answer her. He was looking at the wall of guitars again. "Mr. Deal," I said. "There's a lot of them," he said. "Sir?" "On the wall." "Yes, sir. 31, I think, unless somebody bought one Saturday and I didn't get the hook filled." He nodded slowly, like I'd told him something worth hearing. And then he picked up the guitar case by the handle, the whole thing, and started for the door with it. "Whoa! Hey, Mr. Deal." The man with the batteries stepped out of the way with his hands up a little, the way people do. I came around the end of the counter. I want to be understood here, and I know that's a phrase people use before they say something self-serving, but I mean it plain. I was not afraid. I was annoyed. I had a customer walking out with an item mid-transaction, which happens maybe 4 times a year. And the correct response is to let him walk out. Because it's his guitar, and no money has changed hands, and chasing a man into a parking lot over a $200 dreadnought is how you end up on the news. I came around the counter anyway, because I'd already said 240 out loud in front of witnesses, and some part of me wanted the deal closed more than it wanted the day to be simple. "Sir, if you've changed your mind, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Just let me get your license back to you." He stopped at the door, stood there with his hand on the push bar, the guitar hanging off his other hand at a bad angle, the case's bottom corner about 2 inches off my floor tile. The strip out that window is nothing much. Cracked lot, 4 spaces of shade under the sweet gum that the landlord won't cut down. Then Hollowell Avenue, then the fence, then Tuggle's Tire and Brake, then a barbecue place called Little Delta that's been closed on Mondays since before I signed my first lease. Past that, the on-ramp to the 219 spur, which is not a real highway, whatever the sign says. At 11 in the morning on a Tuesday in July, there ought to have been 2 cars at the light and a truck at Tuggle's with its hood up. There were 9 or 10 cars stopped in the eastbound lane, none of them moving, and I couldn't see the light from that angle to know if it was even cycling. "Vernell." "I see it." Deal let go of the door bar. He turned around, and the guitar case swung and cracked into the corner of my sunglasses spinner, and about 40 pairs of $8 sunglasses went across the floor. "Hey now," said the battery man. Deal's mouth was open. Not slack, open like a man about to speak who has forgotten the front part of the sentence. And he stood there with the case in his fist and his mouth open, and he made a sound out of the back of his throat that I have never once been able to describe to anybody. And I have tried, because the police asked me, and then the state people asked me, and then a fellow from a university called the shop and asked me, and I gave all three of them a different answer. The closest I've got, a man clearing his throat while somebody else is pouring water out of a jug. Sir, you need to set that down and sit down. I had my hands out, palms down, like calming a dog. Vernell, call over to Tuggles and see if Ray's got... Phone's doing something. What's it doing? It's not ringing. It's making the... She held it up, which is useless. Nobody can hear another person's phone from 6 feet. It's the fast busy, like the storm. Deal took a step toward the counter. The battery man got out of the way again, and this time he went all the way to the jewelry case and put his back against it. And one of the two women grabbed her friend's arm and said, clear as anything, "That's what my son was saying about." I turned my head toward her. Ma'am? He works at the plant in Tallahassee. He called me this morning and said they sent everybody home at 6 and wouldn't say why. Okay. He said a fellow bit the shift lead. You hear a sentence like that, and it does not do what you'd expect. It doesn't land. It comes into your head sideways and gets filed under nonsense, under my son said, under people repeat things. And it sits there quiet for about 4 minutes while you go on managing the situation in front of you with the tools you already had in your hand. Mr. Deal. I'd gotten around him. I don't know how exactly. I remember the sunglasses under my shoe. Set the guitar down. He set the guitar down. That's the thing that kept me stupid for another few minutes. He responded. Not fast, and not like a man who understood, but the case went down on the tile with a knock, and his hand came off the handle. And any reasonable person watching that would say, well, he's in there somewhere. He's just messed up on something. Which is what I said, out loud. I said, he's on something, to Vernell in front of him, the way you do when you've decided a person isn't listening. And then his head turned toward my voice with about a half-second delay, like a satellite dish finding a signal, and his weight came forward. I want to say I moved. I didn't. Vernell hit him in the chest with the ticket book, both hands, the way you'd shove a door open with a box in your arms. 63 years old, 5'1", 11 years of hauling boxes of tags off the printer. And she put him back 3 feet and into the sunglasses spinner again. Out, she said. Go on, out. He went down over the spinner, and the whole rack came apart, the plastic column snapping at the base joint, the way I always knew it would. That was when the fear came in, not at the license, not at the noise he made. When my 63-year-old bookkeeper had to shove a man in my store because I was standing there running numbers on a guitar. Get the door, I said. Vernell, get the door, get the... She was already at it. She got the deadbolt over, and then she got the second one, the one at the floor that I put in after the break-in. And she stood up with her hand on the small of her back, and her face was gray. Behind us, Deal was getting up off the sunglasses. There's a thing about my building I should explain, because everything after this depends on it. And I don't want anybody thinking there was a clever plan. I bought the place in '03. It had been a carpet outlet, and before that, a Western Auto, and the front 2/3 is just open floor, glass cases in a U, guitars on the wall, tools and yard equipment along the back, the electronics case by the register. The back third is different. The back third is a poured concrete box a previous owner built for reasons nobody could ever tell me. 12 by 14, walls a foot thick, no windows, one door. When I got my jeweler's license, I lined it out for the gold and the guns. Racked shelving on 2 walls, a steel plate door with a mechanical dial and a daylock lever, an old drop safe bolted through the slab in the corner, and a mini-split AC head high on the back wall running off its own circuit, because the state has humidity requirements for firearm storage, and because I did not want to be sweating on somebody's grandmother's rings while I graded them. Everybody who came in called it the vault. I called it the back room, because calling it a vault makes people think about robbing you. 2 flaws, and I knew both of them the whole time. The way you know your own bad knee. 1. The mini-splits line set, and the drain and the fresh air makeup all run out through a chase in the back wall to a louvered box on the outside of the building. And that box sits at ground level in the alley behind the store, and it is held on with 6 sheet metal screws. 2. The door only locks from the outside. That's how a daylock works on that kind of steel plate. You throw the lever from the hall, you spin the dial, and the door is shut. From inside, there's a mechanical release so you can't be trapped. That's code. That's the whole point. No jeweler in America wants to die in his own strong room because a customer bumped a lever. From the inside, you can always get out, which means from the inside, you cannot keep anybody out. Not really. You can hold the release and pray your arms hold. And that's it. I've thought about that a great deal since. The battery man's name was Curtis Foster, and I'd sold him a pressure washer 2 summers back, and I didn't remember until later. He got deal from behind, both arms around him under the armpits, and he yelled something I didn't catch. And then it was me and him, and the 2 of us walked that man backwards across my sales floor to the side door by the loading bay, and Vernell got the door, and we put him out into the heat. He didn't fight us. I want that on the record because it's the part people don't believe. He pushed. But he pushed like a fridge pushes when you're moving it steady. No rhythm, no intent to hurt. Just the whole mass of him coming forward without any decision behind it. Curtis was the one who got hurt, and neither of us knew it yet. Deal's teeth caught his forearm on the way out the door. Bare graze. Looked like a scratch off a rose bush. The door shut. I got the bar down. Then the 3 of us stood in the loading bay with our hands on our knees in that dead air by the roll-up, breathing, and the AC compressor on the roof kicked on. And I remember being aware of the sound of it, because it meant we still had power. And I remember not knowing yet that this was a thing worth noticing. His guitar's still in there, Curtis said. Yeah. You gonna give it back to him? I looked at him, and he looked at me, and something in both our faces let go a little. And we laughed. Not a good laugh. But we did. Randy, Vernell said from the doorway. Front. What? The Amato girl's out there banging on the glass. She was 14, maybe 15, and she worked weekends at the nail place at the far end of the strip. And she was standing at my front door in a purple polo shirt, with her hands flat on the glass and her mouth going. I got the deadbolts back and pulled her in, and she came in so hard she went past me and hit the counter. They're in the salon, she said. They're in the salon. Who is? Ms. Yolanda and the guy from... She stopped. She was doing that thing where the breath comes faster than the words. The guy who does the vape store. He came in the back. Her arms... Slow down. I'm not going back down there. Nobody's asking you to. They said stay inside and lock the doors. Who said? My phone said. She had it in her fist. She held it up, and I took it. And it was one of those emergency alerts, the kind that make the noise. and it said something about a public health emergency in 3 counties, and to shelter in place and avoid contact with persons exhibiting aggressive behavior. Persons exhibiting aggressive behavior. I have thought about the person who wrote that. Some poor state employee in Montgomery with a form in front of him and a checkbox for the noise it makes, and he had to fit it in the character limit, and that's what he came up with. When'd this come? I don't know, just now. Vernell, you get one? She'd already put hers face up on the glass. Same words. Timestamp said 10:58. Deal had walked in my door at 10:41. I know because the pawn ticket I never finished had the time on it, and it was still sitting on the countermat 2 days later with his license under it. So the alert came out while I was arguing about a guitar. Turn on the scanner, I said. The scanner lives in the office on a shelf over the filing cabinet, a Uniden I've had since before the county went digital and which now only picks up the fire channels and the road crew. And, if the weather's right, a fellow in Chilton County who talks to his brother about deer. Vernell went and got it and set it on the counter, and I ran the cord to the outlet under the register. It came up in the middle of something. That's a negative on Hollowell. We're not going to be able to get a unit down there for a hiss. Stack them at the middle school. Tell them stack at the middle school and hold. Hold for what? Curtis said. Nobody answered him. The 2 women were still by the jewelry case. The older one had her hand on the glass, and I noticed her fingers were leaving prints. And I noticed that I noticed it, and that a normal Tuesday version of me would have gotten the blue rag out. Ma'am, y'all should probably... I stopped. Should probably what? Go home? Out that door? My car's right there, she said. I know. I can see it. I know you can. Her friend, the younger one, hadn't said anything since she'd grabbed her arm. She was maybe 50, dark braid down her back, wearing scrubs with cartoon dogs on them, and she was not looking out the window at all. She was looking at the door to the back room, which is a big steel plate with a dial on it, and which is not subtle. That a safe? She asked. It's a room. With that door? With that door. She nodded once and went back to looking at it. Here is where I want to be careful, because this is the stretch where I did the most damage. For the next hour and 40 minutes I ran my store. I don't have a better way to say it. I got the glass cleaned. I got the sunglasses swept up with the push broom out of the loading bay and dumped in a box, and I set the box on the end of the counter like I was going to do something with it. I called my daughter in Prattville and got the fast busy, and called her again and got it again, and told myself the network was jammed with everybody's mother calling everybody, which was probably even true. And I went and got the guitar case off the floor and put it behind the counter where it wouldn't get stepped on. Vernell asked me twice what we were doing. The first time I said, "We're waiting on the county." The second time I said, "Don't start." I've apologized to her for that since. She said she didn't remember it. She remembers everything. The Amato girl, Isabel, she made me learn it right. She said it twice and waited. Both times, sat on the stool behind the register and would not put her phone down and read us things off it. Some of them were real and most of them were people repeating other people. A hospital in Montgomery going on divert. A wreck on 65 with people walking between the cars. A woman in Wetumpka posting that she could hear it in her neighborhood, which meant nothing at all and scared me worse than the hospital. Curtis stood at the front window with his arms crossed and gave a running count of the cars stopped on Hollowell. 11. Then 14. Then he stopped counting and said, "Some of them are getting out." Getting out and going where? Walking. Which direction? Both. The heat index that day hit 106. I know because the radio said it later, and because by 1 o'clock the front of my store had gone from cold to just barely cool, since the rooftop unit was cycling constantly against 1,400 square feet of west-facing glass and losing. Around 1:15, the power flickered. Not off, flickered. The lights dipped and the register beeped and the scanner cut and came back. And everybody in the building looked up at the ceiling at the same time, which is a thing people do that I'd never noticed before. Was that us or was that everybody? Vernell asked. Curtis put his face near the window. Tuggle's sign's still lit. That's a good sign then. It's a lit sign, he said. I don't know what kind of sign it is. That's when I finally went in the back room. Not to shelter, to get the cash. I had 1,100 and change in the drawer, and I had the rest in the drop safe, and I had the gold in the racks. And I went in there with a canvas bank bag, and I stood in the cold of that little concrete box with the mini-split ticking above me, and I started counting. Vernell came and stood in the doorway. Randy, just a second. What are you doing? I'm getting the... Randy. I stopped counting. She had her arms folded. She had her reading glasses up in her hair. She said, if the power goes and that door's shut, does that AC still run? No. How long's the air last in here? I don't know. Guess. Vernell, I don't know. It's not a submarine. There's a chase in the back wall for the line set. There's air comes through there. It's not sealed like... Then it's not a safe room. It's a strong room. It's for gold. Uh-huh, she said, and went back out. At 1:40, the noise started. It came from the west end of the strip, which is where the nail place is, and it was a car alarm, which is nothing. Car alarms go off all day. But this one went and nobody shut it off. And under it, when the compressor cycled down, you could hear a sound I'd describe as a crowd at a distance, except that a crowd at a distance has a shape to it. Rises and falls. Somebody laughs and it comes across the parking lot louder than the rest. This didn't have any shape. Curtis came away from the window and sat down on the arm of the chair by the layaway rack, which nobody ever sits in, and started rolling his sleeve up and down over his forearm. Up, down, up. Let me see that, the woman in the dog scrubs said. It's a scratch. I know what it is. Let me see it. He rolled the sleeve up and she looked at it, and she didn't touch it, and she didn't say anything. And Curtis pulled the sleeve back down and said, it's a scratch, again to nobody. At 2 o'clock the front glass got hit. I say hit. Something came against it, hard, at hip height, the whole pane going in a wave the way big glass does. And Isabel screamed, and the older lady from the jewelry case sat straight down on the floor. It was a man in a Tuggles shirt. I knew him, not well. His name was Ray something, or he worked for Ray. And he had a way of coming in every February and looking at the same used chainsaw and never buying it. And there had been a running joke about it for 4 years, and I could not for the life of me pull his name up. He hit the glass again with his shoulder and his head and his hands all at once. No order to it. Back, I said. Everybody back. Get behind the counter. Will it hold? Curtis had the broom in his hands, and I don't know when he picked it up. It's tempered. It's rated for... And then I quit, because I did not actually know what it was rated for. I knew what the insurance man had told me in '09, and I knew that I'd never in my life seen it tested. Vernell was already at the back room door. Randy. Yeah. Now? Yeah. And then, because I am who I am, I said, grab the bank bag off the shelf. And she looked at me for a full second before she went in. We had 9 minutes, more or less. And I know almost exactly what went into that room, because I have counted it in my head about 4,000 times. 8 people. Me, Vernell, Curtis Foster, Isabel Amato, the 2 ladies from the jewelry case, Doreen Walker, and her friend in the dog scrubs, whose name was Loretta Kim, and who had retired from 31 years of school cafeteria management, which she told us at hour 6, and which explains a great deal, and then 2 more who came through the side door at the loading bay in the last 90 seconds. A young man named Tam Nguyen, who drove for the auto parts store and had been trapped in his box truck in my lot for an hour, and a big quiet fellow in a grease-stained polo who never gave anybody a full name and answered to Bear, and who I am fairly sure was the one who'd been sleeping in the sweet gum shade some nights that spring. And what we brought in with us: 4 cases of bottled water off the pallet in the loading bay, which was there because I'd bought it for the sidewalk sale in June and never opened it. 2 flats of Vienna sausages and a box of saltines out of the office. Vernell's purse, the scanner and its cord, a 5-gallon bucket that had had drywall mud in it, and a roll of trash bags. Curtis's DeWalt batteries, which turned out to matter, a shop light on a hook, my toolbox, the bank bag, which turned out to matter not at all, and what we did not bring in: the first aid kit off the wall by the time clock, which I saw and looked at, and decided we'd get on the next trip. There was no next trip. Bear got the door. I want to be plain about the order of things. I was inside already, kneeling, dragging the water cases against the shelving to make floor space. Vernell was inside with Doreen. Isabel and Loretta came through together. Curtis came in with the shop light. Tam came in last, backwards, dragging the bucket. Bear stood in the hall with his hand on the edge of that steel plate and looked back down the length of my store, and I heard the front glass go, not shatter, not the movie sound, more like a shovel going into gravel. And he pulled the door and stepped in and swung it shut and put his shoulder against it and held the release lever down with both hands. And the light in that room went to nothing but the little green LED on the mini-split. Somebody was making a sound. It took me a long minute to work out it was Doreen, and that she was praying, and that she was doing it under her breath, with her face in her hands so as not to bother anybody, which is the most Alabama thing that happened in that entire room. "Light," Vernell said. "Somebody find the light." I found it. Overhead fluorescent, a 2-tube shop fixture I'd wired myself off the same circuit as the mini-split. And it came on in that stuttering way old fluorescents do and showed us all to each other. 9 faces. Sorry, 8. And Bear with his back to us against the door. Concrete on all 4 sides, painted that pale green they used in schools, with the paint gone chalky along the bottom where the slab wicks moisture in summer. Steel racking on 2 walls with the trays in them. The gold in the trays. The long guns in the rack behind a locked mesh panel. The drop safe in the corner with a bad wobble in one anchor. A mini-split head up high, running chest-high, cool air pushing across the top of everybody's head. 12 by 14. That's a room the size of a small bedroom. Put 8 adults and a teenager in it, and you can't take 3 steps without touching somebody. "Are we locked?" Isabel asked. "There's no lock from in here," I told her. "What?" "There's no—" I got up off my knees and went over and put my hand flat on the plate above Bear's shoulder. "It's a jeweler's door. It can't lock from inside because you can't have people getting shut in. You throw the lever from the hall. So it's open. It's shut. It's just not locked." "Those aren't the same thing," Loretta said. She'd sat down on a water case with her back to the racking and her hands on her knees like a woman waiting for a bus. "In my experience, those are not the same thing at all." "No, ma'am." Then somebody's got to hold it. Yes, ma'am. Bear shifted his weight. Didn't turn around. I got it. You've got it right now, Loretta said. That's a different thing than got it. He didn't answer. I got the toolbox open. Underneath the wrenches, there was a length of half-inch all thread about 30 inches long, left over from when I hung the racking. And I have never in my life been so glad about a piece of scrap. Move your left hand. Bear moved it. I got the all thread through the release lever's yoke and cross-braced it against the interior door frame. And it wasn't right. And it wasn't rated for anything. And if a truck had hit that door, the rod would have bent like a coat hanger. But it took the lever out of play. It meant no push from the hall was going to pop the release. And it meant nobody had to stand there with his arms shaking. Bear stepped back off the door and looked at what I'd done and rubbed his palms on his thighs. That'll do, he said. Those were the first 3 words he said to me. He said maybe 200 more the whole time we were in there, and about 60 of them mattered. The first hour was the worst hour for noise and the best hour for morale, which sounds backwards and isn't. You could hear everything through that wall. Not clearly. The concrete turned it all to thumps and drags. But the door was steel, and the door carried sound like a drumhead. And we sat there and listened to my store get taken apart. The guitars came off the wall. You could tell each one that hollow bang, and then the long, dying ring of the strings. 31 of them, over about 20 minutes. Not all at once. No pattern to it. Just one and then a while and then 2 together. Vernell said, "That's the guild." Don't. It is, though. I know it is. Somewhere in there, the glass cases went. Isabel had her hands over her ears and her knees up, and Loretta had moved to sit next to her without seeming to move at all. One of those cafeteria lady maneuvers, and had a hand flat on the girl's back. Tam Nguyen sat with his back against the drop safe with his cap in his hands, and turned it around and around by the brim. He did that the entire time. Days of it. The bill of that cap got soft as cloth. "My grandmother's at the house on Pine," he said. "To the room, not to anybody. She don't answer the phone even normal times." "Where's Pine?" Curtis asked. "Off the spur, past the Delta." "That's not far." "No." Nobody said anything else about it, and Tam turned his cap. At some point, I got the scanner plugged in, and we had that, which was better than nothing, and worse than nothing, depending on the hour. Most of it was road crew. Then, around 4, a voice came up on the fire channel that wasn't a dispatcher, some fellow using the radio like a telephone. And he said, "Anybody at Station 6? Anybody at 6?" about 9 times. And then he said, "Y'all, if anybody's on here, don't come down Hollowell." And then nothing else, not that night, not ever. "That's us," Isabel said. "Hollowell's us." "Yep." "Why'd he say it like that?" I didn't have an answer for that, and Loretta gave me a look that said, "Don't invent one." Here's what I learned about 8 strangers in a concrete box, and it isn't inspiring. Everybody wants to know what everything is worth. Second hour, third hour. Once the noise on the other side of the door settled from crashing into that steady shuffling drag it kept up for the next several days, people started looking at the shelves. Doreen Walker was the first. She was still shaky and she'd been quiet. And then she said out of nowhere, "How much gold is on that rack?" I told her. Because she asked and because I'm dumb. There was a stretch of quiet after that. "That's a lot of money," Curtis said. "It's a lot of gold. It's not money if there's nobody to sell it to. Gold's always money. Gold's money when there's a market. Right now it's a rack of rings and a lot of Black Hills gold nobody's ever wanted, and about 9 pounds of dental." "You keep dental?" You'd be amazed. Tam laughed once, and it was the first laugh in the room, and it opened something up. For about a day, that's how it went. We priced things. Not seriously, it was a way to pass hours. Curtis wanted to know what a good pressure washer went for used. And I told him, and he said that was robbery, and I said it was retail, and Vernell said, those are the same thing, and everybody got a little relief out of that. But it curdled. It was always going to. Second night, and I only know it was night because Vernell had a wristwatch and kept it wound and announced the time every so often. Like a woman in a lighthouse, Bear said something from the corner where he sat. You got long guns behind that mesh. The room got different. I do. Why's it locked? Because it's supposed to be. There's nobody coming to check. There's 9 of us in a room the size of a bathroom. He thought about that. He was slow the way a big man is allowed to be slow. And I made the mistake early of thinking slow meant something else. And I was wrong. Not saying pass him out, he said. Saying if that door goes, I'd rather it be open. Loretta, and if it don't go, what have we got? A locked box in a locked box. With 9 people and a teenager, and one of 'em's already... She stopped herself and didn't look at Curtis. Curtis looked at the floor. We'd all been not looking at that arm since about hour 2. It wasn't a bite. I need to be fair to Curtis Foster. It was a scrape, a graze off a tooth on his forearm. 4 inches of scratch that had scabbed by noon and looked, honestly, like nothing. By the second morning, it had gone red at the edges, and he was hot to the touch, and he'd stopped talking about pressure washers. He knew. He knew before anybody said it, and he handled it better than I would have. Y'all move over that way, he said. And he took the corner by the drop safe and he stayed in it. And when Loretta brought him water, she set it on the floor and slid it. And he said thank you every single time. It might just be infected, Isabel said. 15 years old, and she said it about 9 times over 2 days. Like regular infected. Like a cut. Might be, Curtis said. My uncle got a cut on a boat cleat and his whole leg. Might be. Loretta got me by the elbow at the water cases, turned her back to the room, and spoke about 4 inches from my ear. When it happens, that rod of yours isn't going to be the problem. He's going to be in here with us. I know. Do you know, or do you know like you knew about that door? I didn't answer her. She said, You've got a room full of steel shelving and a locked gun rack, and I've fed 1,200 children a day in a building with 2 exits. So I'll tell you what I'd do, and then you can go be the owner about it. That's how she talked. She'd say something with a blade in it, and then hand you the decision back like she was passing a tray. What she wanted was the drop safe moved. That safe is a Holland, 400 and some pounds, bolted through the slab in the corner with 4 wedge anchors, and one of them bad since the day I put it in. Her idea was to break it free, walk it out to the middle of the floor, and use it to split the room. Not a wall, a line. Something a man coming out of a fever has to go around instead of through. It took Bear and Tam and me most of the 3rd morning with a pry bar and a floor jack out of the toolbox, and it broke a chunk of slab out around the bad anchor. And when it finally came free, it went over sideways, and Tam got his hand under it and didn't lose the fingers by about an inch. He sat down against the wall and turned his cap and said something in Vietnamese to himself. And then, in English, that's my grandmother's voice, that. She says it when I'm careless. Nobody asked him what it meant. He didn't offer. We stood the safe up in the middle of the floor with the door facing the racks, and it made 2 rooms out of 1, and it cost us 1/3 of our floor space, which by then was the most valuable thing in that building. Curtis went to his side without being asked. The heat is what I can't get people to understand. The mini-split ran on its own 20-amp circuit, and the power stayed on for 3 days. 3 days of that little head blowing cool across the top of the room. And it was still, at all times, close to 90 degrees at the floor with 9 bodies in there. Concrete holds heat. That slab had July in it and no night to get rid of it. You'd put your palm on the back wall and it was warm, and the wall backed onto the alley where the afternoon sun cooked the block from 2 o'clock on. There's a smell that comes up. Everybody knows what I'm talking about and nobody wants it described. The bucket in the corner with the trash bag liners, and the way we set up a routine around it, Vernell instituted that, with the shop light turned to the wall for privacy, which fooled nobody and helped everybody. 9 people and a bucket and a room you can cross in 4 steps. Doreen Walker got dehydrated on the second day and got confused and started asking after her car. Her car was in the lot. It was probably still in the lot. She wanted to go get it, and she was 71 and she stood up and started for the door, and Bear got in front of her without touching her, just filled the doorway with himself, and she stopped and stood there and then sat back down and cried like a child for about a minute, and then stopped and was completely fine and lucid for the rest of the week. Then the water math. 4 cases, 24 bottles a case, 96 half-liter bottles for 9 people in a hot concrete room in Alabama in July. I did that arithmetic on the back of a pawn ticket with the golf pencil out of my shirt pocket, and I did it 4 times because I kept not liking it, and it does not come out well. You want 2 liters a person a day minimum in that heat, and you have got, at 4 bottles a day each, less than 3 days. We went to 2 bottles each, then 2 and a shared one at night. By the 3rd day, Vernell had a system where we'd rinse a mouthful and hold it, and I hated it, and it worked. Here's the trade I made, and I'll put it down without dressing it. Bear wanted the gun rack open. I said no on day 1 and no on day 2. On day 3, Curtis got bad. Not violent. He got quiet and then he got hot. And then he started talking to somebody named Denise. And Loretta told me later that Denise was his sister who died in '98, which she got out of him on the first day when he was still himself. And Bear came over to my side of the drop safe and stood there and said, "Now." And I said, "If I open that rack, it's mine to hand out, not yours." "Fine. I mean it. I decide who holds what." "You want me to say it back to you?" "I want you to say yes." He looked at me for a while. I've been looked at across a counter by a lot of men who wanted something from me, and none of them ever made me feel like that. "Yes," he said. I got the key off the ring and opened the mesh, and I took out a Mossberg pump that had come in on a pawn in April and never been redeemed, and there were 4 shells in a box on the shelf, and I loaded 3 and left the 4th in my pocket for reasons I can't explain even now. I gave it to Bear, not because he'd earned it, because he was the only one in that room whose hands didn't shake, and because I had decided somewhere in the last hour that I did not want to be the man holding it. Vernell watched me do it and said nothing, and went back to winding her watch. Curtis died a little after 4 in the morning on the 4th day, and he was dead maybe 2 minutes before he got up. I'd like to say something about how we handled it. We didn't handle it. He'd been unconscious for hours, and then he wasn't breathing, and Loretta said so, out loud, flat. "He's gone." And Isabel started crying, and Doreen started her praying, and I was still on my feet trying to figure out what to do about the body in a 12 by 14 room, when his heel scraped the floor. Bear was already there. He'd been sitting 3 feet away for 6 hours with that shotgun across his knees. He didn't shoot. That's the part. In a concrete box with steel racking, in the dark, With 9 people, he'd worked it out days before, or he just knew. And he put the butt of the gun in Curtis's chest and drove him back against the wall and held him there with the whole weight of himself. And he said over his shoulder, "Absolutely level. Rod, off the door, then back on." We put Curtis Foster out into the hall. Tam and I got the rod off. Bear walked, like a piece of furniture, that same fridge push, and Curtis was pushing back the same way, and we got the plate open, 11 or 12 inches, and Bear turned him and shoved, and Tam had the door, and I had the rod, and it was back through the yoke before the plate had stopped ringing. There was something else in the hall. We all heard it. It had been out there for 4 days. Isabel was screaming into Loretta's shoulder, and Loretta had both hands on the back of the girl's head, and her eyes were shut. Doreen said, into her hands, "He was a nice man. He bought a pressure washer." And Vernell, 63 years old, 11 years, my bookkeeper, got up off the water case and went to the corner Curtis had been in, and started stacking the empty bottles that had rolled loose there, one on top of another. And she got 4 of them stacked before they fell, and she started again. The power went out at 11 the next morning. The mini-split ticked down and stopped, and the room got very quiet and very loud at the same time, because with the compressor off, you could hear the hall. Within an hour, it was over 100 in there. Within 3, the walls were sweating, and so were we, and Doreen had stopped talking, and Isabel had her shirt over her head. That was when the flaw came due. I've explained the louvered box in the alley. 6 sheet metal screws. The chase behind it runs about 18 inches of dead space through a foot of concrete and comes out high on the back wall behind the mini-split head, and it's maybe 6 inches by 10. And there's a coil of copper line and a drain hose and a bundle of wire filling most of it. And it is not a passage. Nothing is coming through it. I need to say that clearly because for about 40 minutes on the 5th day, everybody in that room thought something was. Something got the louver box off the wall outside. We heard the screws go one at a time over probably an hour, which is not something a person does and is not something an animal does, and I have never gotten a satisfying explanation for it from anybody. Then the box came off and hit the alley, and after that the chase was open to the outside, and the sound of the alley came down that hole into the room like somebody had opened a window onto hell. And air came in with it. Hot air. Alley air, off asphalt, at 104 degrees, smelling like a dumpster in July, and worse than that. But moving. It moved. There was a draw through that chase because the hall was cooler than the alley, and the room was between them. And it was maybe the difference between us dying in there and not. Loretta figured out what to do about the smell and the sound, both. She had Tam and Bear turn the shelving unit off the back wall, empty it, tip it, stand it, as a baffle. And then she took the trash bags and the water off the last case, and she built a wet screen over the mouth of that chase. Bags split flat, hung off the racking, kept damp with a rationed bottle at a time. Air came through wet plastic and came out cooler than it went in. Not cool, cooler. It's a swamp cooler, and it's the oldest trick in the world. And a woman who spent 31 years feeding children knew it, and a man who'd been buying and selling other people's belongings for 22 years did not. "How'd you know that'd work?" "Kitchen exhaust went out in 96, she said. "Middle of May, 1100 lunches." That was the whole story. She didn't do backstory. She did evidence. The 6th day, somebody was in my store who wasn't dead. We heard it through the door, not the drag. Footsteps with intention in them. And then a voice, and then the voice was against the steel. "Anybody in there?" Bear stood up. "Anybody? I can hear the—" A hand hit the plate flat. "I know somebody's in there. The rod's in the thing. I can see it's braced. He couldn't see anything. But he knew about day locks, which meant he was in the trade or close to it. And I knew what that meant. Vernell got my arm. Don't. He's a person. So is the man with the guitar. He's talking. I hear him talking. I put my mouth close to the seam. How many are you? 2. Where'd you come from? Down at the tire place. We've been in the office since Tuesday. Y'all got water? And there it was. The actual question. The one under everything. And I heard my own voice come out with 22 years of counter in it. Absolutely automatic. And I have never been more ashamed of anything. What have you got? The silence on the other side of that door lasted long enough that I heard Isabel shift her feet. Say again? I said, what have you got? There's 9 of us in a room this size, and I've got about a case and a half of water, and I've got nothing else. I can't open this door for nothing. Man, we got a mechanics shop full of... Then go get it. I don't know what I expected. I expected him to curse me. I would have. He said, how much water for a 5-gallon jug of diesel and a hand pump? And that is how the trade happened. Through a steel door, with something moving in the hall 30 feet away. And I want the record to show that I did not think of it as a moral achievement at the time. I thought of it as a deal. I made it the way I'd made 10,000 of them. 2 bottles up front, 4 on delivery. And I made him say the terms back to me, which he did, and which he thought was hilarious. And he laughed through the door and said, "Buddy, you're a piece of work." His name was Warren Thompson. He was Ray's nephew, and he'd been the one hitting the glass with a jack-handle to draw the drag out of my store the night before, which we'd heard and not understood. What the diesel was for was the reason we got out. There's a generator behind Tuggles, a big red thing on a trailer that Ray rented for a paving job and never took back. Warren had gotten it running twice and shut it down both times because the noise brought the whole strip down on him. What he'd worked out, and what I hadn't, was that the noise was the point. If you could put it somewhere, you weren't. I'm not going to make it sound clean. It took 2 more days to set up, and one of those days we spent doing nothing at all, because there was a group of them in the front of my store that would not disperse. And every time Warren moved in the lot, they'd come. But on the 8th day, a little before 6 in the evening, with the light going orange through a hole in my roof I hadn't known about, Warren Thompson and a girl named Kayla Brown got that generator running behind the Little Delta barbecue place, 140 yards west of my back door, with the muffler off and the governor jammed. And everything on Hollowell Avenue went that way. We could hear it going past the chase in the wall. Feet in the alley, dozens of them going west, that dragging shuffle turning into something faster than a shuffle when they got close to the sound. Loretta had Isabel by the wrist. Doreen was on her feet, with her purse on her arm, like she was waiting on a bus. Tam had his cap on his head for the first time all week. I pulled the rod. The hall smelled like nothing I'd been ready for. Whatever was left in my store had cooked in it for 8 days with the power off. We went out through the loading bay, not the front, bare first with the Mossberg. Vernell had my hand, and I didn't notice she'd taken it. Doreen went slow, and nobody hurried her, and Bear stopped and waited every time she stopped, and he never once looked back at us to check. He only watched the mouth of the alley. My store, what I could see of it going past the guitar wall was bare hooks. The cases were down. The layaway rack was on its side with the tags scattered, and somebody had walked through them. And there was a pale rectangle on the wall where the state pawn schedule had been, the one people never read. And the guitar case was still behind the counter, where I'd put it, upright, closed, not a mark on it. Deal's guitar. I stopped for it. Vernell pulled my arm and said my name in a way I'd never heard her say it. And I went. And I've thought since that stopping was the last purely stupid thing I did that week. And that it took me 8 days and a man's death to get from the first stupid thing to the last one. We're at Loretta's sister's place now, out past the water tower on the north side, a brick house with a fenced yard and a garden that had gotten away from her. 11 of us. Warren and Kayla came, and Tam went to Pine Street with Bear on the second night, and came back with his grandmother, 91, who had been sitting in her house the whole time with the doors locked and a cast-iron skillet on her lap, and who was, in her own words, fine and hungry, and where have you been? Bear's real name is Dwight Carter. He told us on the road. He said it like a man handing over something he'd been keeping in his pocket. Doreen's still asking about her car. The generator ran till it ran out, and Warren says he thinks the whole west end of the strip is still full of them, standing around a dead engine behind a closed barbecue place, waiting on a noise that stopped a week ago. Late this afternoon, I got the guitar out of the case on the back steps. The crack under the bridge has opened up another 1/4 inch from the heat, and the top's got a bloom on it from the damp. Tam brought me a bowl of warm water and a rag, and I'm cleaning 8 days of that room off the back of it, working the grain, and Vernal's on the step above me with her watch off and the case open on her knees, going through the pockets a capo, 3 picks, and a folded receipt from a music store in Selma that's been closed since before I was born. She holds up the capo. What's this worth? I take it out of her hand and put it in the pocket where it goes and shut the lid.